Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Mike Pieciak. I'm the state treasurer here in Vermont, and want to welcome you to this town hall that we are hosting. It's our second one of the day. We started this morning in Brattleboro, which is my hometown, and we had a great turnout, a lot of great questions, and really the most powerful part of the entire program was the opportunity to hear from individuals about what you're worried about, what you're concerned about, and what questions you have about changing federal policy and its impact on Vermont and to your local community as well. So I know myself, the legislators who are here, Senator Welch, are all very interested to getting to that part of the program. So I'll kick us off here with a few remarks and then turn it over to Senator Welch, who we're really pleased could be joining us this morning and really excited to get going. So I was mentioning in Brattleboro, you know, fear, anger, and anxiety are three very powerful emotions. And I asked people in the room, you know, have you been feeling more fear, anger, and anxiety over the last couple of months compared to the last couple of years? And we had quite a number of hands go up. I don't know if people are feeling the same way here. As you know, but those emotions, I mean, they're powerful, right? They have an impact on us. They they cloud our judgment. They make our heart race. They make us stay up at night. And the thing that is really most unfortunate about it is that it can drive us to paralysis. It can drive us to thinking, you know, there is no action that I can take as an individual that is significant enough to push back on all the chaos, all the destruction, all the craziness that's going on at the federal level. You know, when you get together, though, when we decide to, instead of isolate, but decide to find community, I think that is the antidote to those emotions, to fear and anger and anxiety. When we get together and realize, oh, everybody else has the same fears that I have, then that fear starts to slip away. When you realize, oh, that anger is palpable, but we can put it to something much more productive, and it doesn't have to lead to us thinking there's nothing that can be done. And then anxiety slips away when we get together and build community with each other. So just want to thank everybody for being here, because that's an important step of taking that action of getting together, hearing from each other, you expressing to your elected officials what your concerns are, and for us to be able to take that back. We're planning to summarize everything we hear in Brattleboro and here into a document that we'll share with legislative leadership, our congressional delegation. We didn't have the opportunity to have Senator Welch in Brattleboro, for example, so we'll make sure he has those comments, and also to the governor's office as well, so that your information, your questions, your concerns will be lifted up and provided to those across state government. You know, the only other point I want to make about that community is, you know, 5 years ago this week, the COVID-19 pandemic started to really rage across the country, across Vermont, across the world. And that was a moment where fear and anger and anxiety were, again, really palpable. But by design, we really had to be apart from each other. We couldn't be together answering questions that we had, or sharing our concern, or expressing what action are you going to take today. And again, that's why it's so important for us to find opportunities like this to be together and take those actions and find motivation to do more once we leave this afternoon. So we wanted to set up this transition town hall because we were so worried about what was coming on the horizon once the election happened in November. I was the commissioner at the Department of Financial Regulation during the first Trump administration, and we found that when we were proactive and coordinated, that we had a better response at the state of Vermont level. And when we were not as proactive, when we were not as coordinated, the fast changing federal policies sometimes caught us on our heels, and we couldn't react as quickly as we needed to. So that was really the whole purpose of the task force, getting experts outside of our office, people that are being impacted by tariffs, people that are being impacted by immigration orders, people that work in social services on the ground, people that have experience with the federal government, have experience with state government, so they can help us think through all of these changing policies and have us build some opportunity to react to them at the state of Vermont level. There are a couple of data points that I wanted to mention that are things that I'm focused on and worried about. The first one is 36%. 36% of our state's budget comes from the federal government. There are entire departments in the state of Vermont that are largely funded by federal monies. And most importantly, in some ways, just in terms of its overall impact, Medicaid is the most significant receiver of federal funds here in Vermont, and Medicaid provides critical services to over 160,000 Vermonters. So that's certainly one concern when we're thinking about the changes that are coming out of Washington, D.C. The other one is 67%, which is the percentage of imports from Canada that we receive in Vermont. So we have really broad and important relationships with Canada and specifically with Quebec. A lot of our goods get shipped to Quebec, a lot of their goods get shipped here. And also, in terms of tourism, a lot of Canadians, estimated over 700,000 Canadians visit Vermont every year, spending $150 million in our economy. So that is a significant concern. What does that mean in terms of the economic impact of that U.S.-Canadian relationship? And also just the community and social impact as well. A lot of us up here in the northern part of the state have family and friends just over the border. So beyond the economic impact, sort of what are those long-term societal impacts as well. The other number is 1 in 5. 1 in 5 Vermonters work for a nonprofit. Nonprofits, for the most part, most broadly, receive a lot of funding from the federal government. A significant number of nonprofits would not be able to operate as they do now if their federal funds were extinguished. So they're doing a lot of good work in our community, but they're also an important economic driver of the Vermont economy. Billions of dollars contributed to the Vermont economy by our nonprofits here in Vermont. And the last thing I want to mention is number 5. So we're 5th per capita in the country when it comes to the amount of federal disaster aid we've received as a state over the last 15 years from FEMA. So over the last 15 years, Vermont's 5th per capita. We don't have the major billions and billions of dollar storms that you might see on TV from Florida or Louisiana, but in terms of its per capita amount, we're right there at the top. And if you think about the number of major disaster declarations that have been issued over that same time, we're number 7 in the country, not on a per capita basis, but in an absolute number of declarations that have been declared. So I mention that because, you know, as we're thinking through this as a task force, we're thinking, where are the places that Vermont is most dependent on the federal government? And then where are the places where the federal government has some of the greatest latitude to decide whether or not to continue to support Vermont or other like states? And certainly FEMA funding declaring a natural disaster is one of those concerns. So we'll continue to monitor those. We're thinking about policies relating to responding to those issues, but again, it's going to take us opportunity for us all working together as legislators, as elected leaders, and as local leaders as well. So with that, I do want to thank some of the folks that are here with us today. I see Jesse Baker, the town manager here in South Burlington, Elizabeth Fitzgerald, who's one of the select board members, Michael Scanlon, who's a select board, or city board member, I should say, here in South Burlington. Oh yeah, for sure. They're asking for you to stand up and be recognized. Andrew Chalnick, I saw. Tim Hartnett. And Lori Smith. Thank you all for being here. You'll hear from some of our legislators here in a minute, so I won't introduce them, but I'm seeing if there are any other legislators who are here that, oh, sorry, Bridget. So, you want to stand up and introduce yourself? Yeah. And we'll have an opportunity to hear from our legislators here as well. But at this time, I'd like to turn the stage over to our U.S. Senator, a friend of mine, Senator Peter Welch. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be with you. You know, Michael, what you said about community is so important. You know, we're all trying to navigate the lives we live, raising our families, paying the bills at the end of the month, dealing with health setbacks at times, trying to figure out how to keep the city going and deal with all the challenges that we face. And the thing that we have that helps us through that is a sense of solidarity that other people are facing it. And that's where I'm in agreement with you. But I can't be here with good news. I just want to be candid. I mean, we have a president who is on a lawless rampage. And it is about tearing us apart. It's about tearing apart the norms that have guided us, the guardrails that we've had to get through thick and thin. Whether it's COVID or a recession or the 2008 housing crisis, where there's an immense amount of stress, but we have anchors. And it's goodwill, it's decency, it's mutual respect, it's the rule of law. It's the rule of law, and it's empathy. It's not cruelty, okay? And I have never seen a situation like this. You know, all of us who go into any kind of public service, and it doesn't have to be elected office. I served in the state senate for many years. Mike's the treasurer. You've got select board members here, but you've got folks who work in the community, and it might be at the food shelf. It might be on the school board. It might be in the LGBTQ Alliance. But it is about a commitment that we have where we understand helping others helps us. That's what we do. That is absolutely under attack in Washington under the Trump administration. You know, when I went into politics, I thought I'd be dealing with, quote, issues. You know, the environment, really important. Healthcare, really important. But what's happening now is our democracy is absolutely under attack by the President of the United States. That's what's going on, all right? So just a few things. This continuing resolution that you've been dealing with that I voted against, Bernie did, Becca did. Well, you know, there's a part of this that's a hard call because the shutdown hurts people. I have always been against the shutdown. You should have the right to expect we'll keep the lights on and keep providing the functions that government does, all right? But this continuing resolution is an abdication by the Republicans in Congress to strip ourselves of the responsibility we have as an independent and co-equal branch of government to stand up for the checks and balances and the rights of our citizens to do their best. And I'll just tell you a couple of things. And on the level CR in this dysfunctional Washington, where we can't get to an agreement on the budget, it's a holding pattern. It's a status quo. You say for the next several months or the next month while we can't agree on a final budget, we'll keep it as it is while we keep working on it. But that means the amount that you appropriate stays the same and where it's spent stays the same. This so-called CR blew that away. Significant cuts for veterans, for health care, for education. But even more importantly, it delegated authority of Congress and the power of the purse to decide how to appropriate and where to spend. It gave it to President Trump, all right? So he gets to move money around and take it away from programs that he dislikes, food stamps, environment, and give it to programs he favors, or not spend it at all. And the reason that the House Freedom Caucus, which has never voted for any budget at all or any spending at all, agreed to this is because they are confident that given that discretion and authority to Trump, which he does not have as an executive, that's the congressional authority, okay, that he'll do the dirty work. And he's quite willing to do it. Another thing that just makes the point about how bad it is, you know, these tariffs that are absolutely reckless. They're going to do no good for anybody. They have nothing to do with economic policy except causing economic harm. Our farmers are hit. They're going to pay higher for the imported fertilizer we get from Canada. Our lumber, our raw logs are going to go up to Canada. They get processed, come back here to help us build our houses, 25% tariff. Smart idea in the current state of housing here in Vermont and in the country. Just to name a couple of things. The tariff authority in the Constitution belongs to Congress. The House continuing resolution put in a provision that says Congress cannot address the tariffs. Think about that. That would be like the city council here saying they can't address the tax rate. You're stripping yourselves not just of your authority, but your responsibility. So what is this? It's about totally empowering the executive to be a king. That's what's going on.
Then why did he sign? Why did the 7 sign or the 10?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, okay? But the reality here is that our democracy is threatened. And that's not an abstraction, because the reason it is so important is because it is the mechanism by which, when we have really serious challenges, how do we deal with housing? How do we maintain civil rights and expand them? How do we pave our streets? Where there are hard consequential decisions that have to be made about the tax burden, who pays, how do you do it, how do you execute? The democracy is the way where all of us have a seat at the table, where we have an opportunity to be involved, to make our case known, to be heard. In that whole system of checks and balances, you know, that was not an idle concern on the part of our founders when they put in the 3 branches of government, to have checks and balances so there's not an accumulation of excessive power in any one place. That is very much under attack. And what is so alarming to me is that folks I serve with in the United States Congress are willingly ceding and giving up the authority and responsibility we have as an independent branch of government and giving it over to President Trump.
Traitors.
Well, we'll talk.
He's a Russian agent.
All right, I'm getting you more worked up than I am. All right. my point here. No, I get it.
We know
But,
all you're saying, but what do we do? I mean, 'cause
well,
these things are happening.
all right. I don't want to take over here because we want to hear from you. But what do we do? We've got 47 votes in the Senate. We're 3 votes short in the House. Okay, that's a reality. And we have to, there's 2 things we have to do. Okay, number one, I think the work that's done locally is more important than ever. Because what Mike said, us holding ourselves together, taking comfort that we share this concern and apprehension about what's going on, but having a commitment to building our own community here in South Burlington, in our state of Vermont, that really, really matters. Because with Trump on a rampage down there in D.C. and us in a minority, we've got an uphill climb, but I'm climbing. Bernie's climbing. Becca's climbing. And we know you're climbing. So I don't have the answer, but I know that's the problem, and I'm not going to give up, all right? But don't you give up on doing the good work you're doing right here in Vermont, because that community that Mike's talking about, it's more important for us than ever. But I am just trying to be candid with you as your senator in Washington, that as bad as you think it is, it's worse. So you're entitled to have the concern that you're expressing. So thank you all. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you say. I don't want to take over here, but we are going to continue to do our best. And I'm so proud of Vermont and Vermonters for standing up for the Vermont way, which does abide by the rule of law, that does value community, that does embrace empathy and not cruelty. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much, Senator, for your remarks, for being here today, and for all of your efforts in Washington on behalf of Vermonters. I know that there are a lot of folks in the room who probably have things to say, questions, comments, reflections, concerns for both Senator Welch and Treasurer Pieciak to hear, as well as your legislative delegation in Montpelier from South Burlington. And so we're going to take some time to go around the room. I have a microphone. I'll be going on this side. Isaac has a microphone. He'll be going on that side. Because of the setup of the room, if you're in the middle, it might be best for you to project. We might not be able to get the microphone to you, but we'll start with sort of a show of hands, and we'll get to folks as best as we can. I'll start here. And please say your name and your town in case you traveled to South Burlington today.
Hi, I'm Connie Anania, and I'm from right here in South Burlington. First, I would like to say thank you for voting no on that crappy continuing resolution. We applaud you. My question is twofold. One is, when can we expect some of the other Democratic or independent senators to stand up and start fighting, both fists out? I know we're a kind, nice people, but they're not following the rules, so why are we? My second question then comes to, I know this continuing resolution also declared that the rest of the year is one fiscal day, so that you guys can't cancel any emergency that he declares. And I'm worried he's gonna declare some emergencies that we don't need to do things that are way outside of his reach. I mean, a lot of stuff he's doing is way outside of his reach, but I'm talking like way outside. Exactly, I'm worried he's gonna declare martial law.
Let's give an opportunity to answer.
You can't overstate how extreme it'll be, because they have demonstrated a total disregard for the rules of law and for the boundaries. I mean, starting with impoundment, right? Starting with firing people who have civil service protections, starting with firing inspector generals that were put in place to see what's going on in the departments, and he did that against the law. Now, there's been a lot of litigation, and the courts are reinstating a lot of people. We're winning a number of cases in court, but the reality is, I mean, this is the reality. He's doing so much damage so quickly that can you put these back together again, like USAID? I mean, the cruelty of this, think about this. We have food that was grown by Vermont farmers and transported to places like in Africa that's in a warehouse, but we fired the personnel, local, who take that food from the warehouse and deliver it to kids who are starving. Okay, that has happened. Kids are dying. We have medicine in refrigeration units to vaccinate kids. And the people who were doing the vaccinations have been fired. Okay, that's the level of cruelty that's occurring under Trump. So every day I wake up and, you know, it's a nightmare. And I know that's the same for you. We have to do all we can in the Congress. Some of my colleagues, I have empathy for them. You know, a shutdown was not a get-out-of-jail-free card. There were going to be real consequences to that. So some of my colleagues who took that into consideration and they didn't vote in effect for the shutdown because they feared that, I have some empathy for it. And I don't want us to start focusing on them as the problem when it's Trump is the problem, okay? And that's, no, I understand that, but that's what I voted no. And I thought we had to take our chances. We've got radical times, and it's going to take some radical solutions, okay? I'm there. But I understand the focus here, I think, is not just on that, whether that was the right or wrong vote. The focus is what's the cause of the harm, and that's got to be us focusing on what the cause of the harm is, and that's Trump, and that's Musk.
Let's do one from your side of the room.
I don't want questions. Oh, let's hear from people. So I'll hold it.
My name is Hank Brunsky. I'm from Burlington. I want to know how you can, in the future, hold a positive, unified caucus together. Mr. Schumer has done what I think the most destructive thing that he could possibly do as Democratic leader in your body. I know there's a lot of fears about the lawlessness that happens without a federal government in place, but that's on the Republicans. That's what they caused. That's what they reap for us. So you have to have a unified front. If you don't, we lose every blessed time.
You know, this is serious. You're asking a very serious question, because we have to be unified in order to have a shot at being successful. And we had the cloture, so we had enough votes on the Democratic side that if we all voted the same, it would have been a shutdown. So I get your point. And each of us had to make a judgment. You know, shutdown is a very, very serious thing. I have always been against a shutdown, except now, because it's different. All right? But some of my colleagues, it's good faith and it's honest on their part that they fear, and here's the fear. And I can't tell you that this fear is unfounded. Elon Musk wanted a shutdown. And the reason he wanted it was it would make his destructive work easier to do. Because what happens in a shutdown is that Russell Vogt, who's the Office of Management and Budget person, gets the authority, along with Musk, to decide who's an essential worker and who's not, okay? So they get basically the authority to fire everybody who's not, quote, essential. So there was, legitimately so, a real apprehension about, hey, this bad situation could even be worse.
And the courts could prevent that, as they have been preventing the worst atrocities so far. You have to count on the other forms of government, the other branches, as well as your unified branch.
Okay.
And I just don't buy it.
No, I understand you don't buy it. But let me just finish, because the ultimate point I want to get to is if we want to be unified, if we have a difference of opinion on a particular vote at a particular time, where there's an honest debate about what's the best thing for us to do, then we have to get over the fact that we lost in that particular debate and not turn our ally, who just has a reasonable disagreement with us, into the enemy and take our eyes off Musk and Trump. And the second thing, I just want to say, answer your question. If the government shuts down because we don't pass a budget, there's legal emergency authority that the executive has. So the likelihood of the courts protecting us from an action that Congress took by failing to stay open, we'd be much more vulnerable in that. I just want to lay that out. I made the choice that apparently a majority of folks here think was the right one. Because I feel strongly about it. I'm proud of my vote. But I'm saying, as frustrated as you are, who's the adversary here? All right? Who's the adversary? And that's where there's got to be, when we're in this fix, some, I guess, grace given to people we disagree with, but who we know day in and day out are on our side and share our values. But I get your point, and I'll convey that to your friend, Senator Schumer.
I think that many folks in the room, there's probably consensus around just sort of disillusionment with what's going on at the top levels of government right now. But I wonder if, while we have this opportunity with our legislative delegation, with the senator, with the treasurer, if it might be helpful to focus on particular concerns with programs or specific impacts on Vermont that you might want to share about. So we'll start here. We'll kind of do one from the middle.
Hi, I'm Anna Burns from Cornwall. I worked in the Carter administration, and when Reagan took over, I was shocked what they could do in a very short period of time, and that was nothing compared to this. I am sick in my heart of the programs for people experiencing homelessness, mental illness, addiction, and suffering from just being poor. I mean, what? This is America. But what I'm most worried about is Trump turning the military on our legislators and on our judiciary. And I'd like to know if you've thought about that and are talking about that in Washington.
Well, I'll let the senator answer that, if he'd like. And that actually came up this morning in Brattleboro as well. That was a concern that people expressed. So if the senator wants to answer, certainly we'll let him. But I think just as important for us to hear that that's a concern of yours, to event to express that, for us to hear it and to understand it. But we do want to make sure everybody sort of gets an opportunity to comment about what they're worried about.
Yeah, because we want to hear what you have to say, and I don't want to take this over. I'm kind of a party crasher here. Party's not the right word. But that's a legitimate fear. I mean, keep in mind, Donald Trump still claims that he won the 2020 election. All right? And he claims justice was weaponized against him. The process where he was indicted, the process where he was convicted, that was all by the book. And now he's on a vengeance tour. And he fired General Milley, who stood up to him. And now he's appointing to be the head of the Department of Defense a Fox News commentator. So, and he is consistently doing things where whoever is appointed to whatever the job is, the requirement is, A, you're good on TV, and actually this is, I'm going to say number 2, but it's number 1, you take a fealty oath to him, all right? So he does not respect the democratic process. And he's demonstrated to me that he'll do anything that he can to stay in power. So any of your concerns about that have a material basis. But what I also think we need to do, we've got to do what we can where we're at. And you know, I was mentioning coming in here about the incredible leadership that we have in this community of South Burlington and how well you're doing in the face of incredible challenges. Keep that up. Now, keep looking at me and Bernie and Becca and holding us accountable. You know, really watch us. I know you are. I can run, but I can't hide. I know that. But thank you. That's well-founded. But
I've moved over here to the back of the room.
Yeah, go ahead, Ashlyn.
Hi. Yes, probably isn't going to be popular, but I do think Schumer was right, because when we've got to get the Congress back, that's not even a question. We have to get it back. And when it comes to people getting primaried, Republicans, they'll bring that up again about we shut the government down, because they don't hear the whole thing like we do, or probably all the people here are really listening and paying attention, but the majority of Americans are not doing that. So anyway, I think Schumer did the right thing just because of that. And I want to know what they're going to do when it comes to Medicaid, Medicare, getting rid of that. What part of the state is going to try to keep that going? I called the governor's office the other day, says they have an emergency fund, and I asked them how much money and this, and he didn't have the answer. He's supposed to call me back, but he never has.
Well,
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Senator Lyons here in a minute, because she's the chair of House or Senate Health and Welfare, and in a good position to answer your question. But just to think about the budget that was passed by Republicans, $880 million in cuts to Medicaid. There were no specific line items in there. It was just those cuts were going to be found. And when we talked to folks in Vermont about, well, what's the most likely thing that's going to be impacted, sort of a lot of the good work that's happening in the state. Medicaid expansion that covers 17,000 Vermonters. 90% of that is federal funding, only 10% is Vermont. So a lot of Vermonters are getting their health care through that important expansion of Medicaid. Potentially they're going to add work requirements and make it harder for people to get their health insurance, even those that can't have the ability to work. And there may be cuts on a per capita basis that just impact Vermont across the board. I think the Medicaid piece is really important, because even though it's funded by the federal government, it's a program that the state operates, and the state has taken a lot of flexibility through the Medicaid waiver process to implement a lot of creative programs here, not just for healthcare, but making sure elderly people are safe and making sure our children are fed and safe and broadly covered through Dr. Dinosaur. So this is a real concern and a real issue for those of us that work in state government. Senator Lyons, do you want to add anything?
Sure, thanks, I got it. Thank you for the question, and some of the information that Treasurer Pieciak has shared with you is information that we're very much aware of. Obviously, cutting $880 trillion out of the federal budget is beyond we can't even think about it. Vermont, depending on how it's done by the Republican-controlled House, they have 2 bills that they're looking at. One would cut us by about 16.7%, and another would cut us by 25%. That's pretty significant. However, it's not everything. So if the cuts are something that we can start to look at and to manage, where does the money come from? We obviously cannot let our most vulnerable folks down, and we can't let our long-term care leave. We need in-home services. I think you're all aware of the things that Medicaid is so important in providing. So what we can do, and I am also on the Appropriations Committee, so we will, as I talked with the governor the other day, and he said we're going to have to make some serious decisions, and there's no question about it. If some of these cuts come to us, we will be looking at where else in state government can we find and identify dollars? How can we, I don't want to use the word efficient, but we might have to look at where we can be more efficient in order to keep people who are most vulnerable from becoming more and more vulnerable. So that's some thoughts. On the other hand, we recently learned that our program, it's a program for health care that we've been working on called AHEAD. It's a program that the governor, the Green Mountain Care Board, and the Agency of Human Services are working on in collaboration with the federal government. So we would think, oh, that is going to be cut, but we heard the other day that it's going to go forward. And that's a good thing. It will have maybe slightly different requirements than we had anticipated when we signed on. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. Vermont is seen as a model in healthcare. And whenever I invite experts in to talk with us about Vermont's healthcare, the first thing I hear is, oh, Vermont is seen as far and above other states in the work that you're doing. So that's good news. Bad news is, can we trust the federal government? So we are keeping an eye on this. I am working collaboratively with others to understand the implications of any changes that are made. The work requirement being one that I think is untenable. So I'll turn it back to Mike, but thank you.
Yeah, just the only thing I want to add, Senator, is, I was down this week in Washington, D.C. Actually, Senator Welch and I got a chance to get together, but we were down with other treasurers from across the country, and we're all making the point, at least those of us from Democratic states, that Medicaid is a critical part to our economy, that if you're cutting Medicaid, this means that there's going to be a cut to the Vermont economy. 20% of our GDP is relating to health care. We also made the point that 23% of Vermonters are on Medicaid. We are one of the states that voted in the largest percentage for Kamala Harris, but West Virginia, which is the complete opposite, they voted in the largest percentage for Donald Trump. 28% of their population is on Medicaid. This is not an issue that is a blue state or a red state issue. It impacts everybody across the board. It gives me some hope that if things like what you're seeing with Senator Sanders and other leaders now going to other districts across the country to make points like that, that it will actually reverberate back to those Republicans that will have to decide, what they want to do with that bill.
That great minds think alike, all right? That's exactly right. I'm on the Finance Committee. We have jurisdiction over healthcare, or a lot of it. And there's a strike force where we're adopting a Republican state, and I had West Virginia, as it turns out. So Senator Justice, the former governor, now senator, was in the chair, and I went through the number of people on Medicaid in West Virginia, the number of hospitals they have, what happens to their budget. They've got community hospitals like us. And in West Virginia, we don't have the expanded Medicaid and the flexibility that we have here in Vermont. But if you make $12.39 an hour, you are eligible for Medicaid. If you make $12.40 an hour, you aren't, okay? So you're starting from a level where people are barely scraping by. And I just asked rhetorically my colleague, Senator Justice, what happens if we cut Medicaid by 40% to your folks in West Virginia? You get down to $8.22 an hour is what you have to make. So I think your point is right, because right now, my Republican colleagues are terrified of Trump. And in all candor, they have reason to be, because they have strong, their voters support Trump, and they're afraid of the Musk retaliation and $100 million or whatever he'll spend. But at a certain point, as we make it clear, and this is, I think, the really good insight you had, that the people in their states are really going to be hurt by these Trump policies. And there's a lot of folks who voted for Trump, because, by the way, there's a lot of economic anxiety out there. We have it in Vermont. You know, people are really working hard, and at the end of the month, they can't pay their bills. It's going to get worse with these tariffs, because it's electricity, it's home heating fuel, and it's gasoline. Those are basic expenses for all of us. But we've got to get we've got to be able to show concretely how these policies are really hurting the people that thought Trump was going to be something else for them instead of for the billionaires. And this really is an oligarchy in the making. And Bernie says that, he's right about that.
Isaac, let's take two from your side. I want to make sure we're getting around the room.
I think we had a question right here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name's Ned McMahon. I live in Shelburne. I'm a professor at UVM and international development consultant. I've spent 30-plus years of my life working on human rights and democracy and good governance issues overseas, particularly in Africa. I never thought that I would have to be fighting authoritarianism in my own home country. I don't know how I'm supposed to look at people who have put their lives on the line in many countries in Africa for democracy and human rights and tell them that I can't help them anymore. So that's a very deeply felt reaction that I have. I'm going to be selfish for a second and tell you that Trump and Musk have, so far as I can see, reached into my wallet and taken out $3,600 of my own money for work that I did in West Africa last October. When I think about what can be done, I think I want to direct maybe our collective attention towards collective action. And in that regard, my experience working on promoting democracy overseas is you've got to get civic organizing going and have people who are prepared to stand up and speak truth to power. And so groups like, I don't want to just publicize one group, but one that I've heard a lot about recently and I've learned more and more about is a group called Indivisible that's got chapters growing up around here. That's one thought. The second thought about collective action is let's get practical here. In a few weeks, probably, there's going to be an election about 10 miles from here across the lake in New York 21 Congressional District, the Stefanik District. I think that we should all be thinking about how can we flood the zone and make the voices heard of the people who are suffering in that district. Talk about high levels of Medicaid, by the way, in New York 21, and be supportive of the Democratic candidate there, quite frankly, and show that there is pushback to the horrors that are being visited upon us now. That's all.
I think we can do another question.
All right, Jay for Richmond Select Board.
The issue I want to ask about is FEMA. I know I'm asking the unanswerable because we don't know what that loon in Washington is going to take it in his mind to do. But if FEMA money dries up because he decides we don't need to pay for disasters, it's going to cripple my town and a lot of towns just like it. We will not be able to pay for essential governmental services without FEMA money. So anything that can be done to preserve the FEMA funding stream is critical to us.
Thank you. I have one question over here as well.
Hi, I'm Lisa Mueller-Rao. I'm from Williston, and I want to thank everybody for being here, especially our leaders, our elected leaders. I'm so grateful that you're here and letting us talk to you and giving everybody a voice. We can do good things, and just like that gentleman over there said, we have to be engaged. We have to get together with our community. We have to support each other where we didn't have to before. It might be emotionally, it might be with money, it might be with just a hug every once in a while. We're doing good, we're aware of what's not good, and so let's stick together. We might have minor differences, but the big picture is we just have to have peace in America.
Thank you.
I'm Jean Blackmore. I'm from Charlotte, and I have a question for Mike about numbers, your favorite thing. I know we all know the percentage you spoke about at the beginning, the tariffs, the layoffs, all the things that are going to impact us economically, but they really haven't yet, other than people have been laid off. So can you explain sort of the timing of the impacts and any forecasting the state's going to be doing to help people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Gene. I mean, if you think about the impacts that we've seen on the economy to date, you know, you look at the stock market, trillions of dollars of value has gone away, 5 trillion over the last 6-7 weeks. If you look at the consumer sentiment, it dropped dramatically. If you think about the University of Michigan that puts out their economic analysis about what the GDP growth is going to be, this quarter looks like it's going to be negative after consistent growth. And all of that gets tied back, in my opinion, to just sheer uncertainty. There's no actual policy yet that is driving that economic impact. So when you hear the Treasury Secretary at the national level say, you know, oh, well, you know, we're detoxing from federal spending, like that hasn't happened yet. I mean, they've done it in dribs and drabs, but the true deep impact is yet to be felt. And even with that not happening, we're already seeing significant impact to the economy. So we're going to have to keep a really close eye on it. We do consensus forecast twice a year in Vermont. The next one's in July. And if we are heading toward a recession, then the expectation, which is growing revenues in our state, I mean, that's the point that I think we have to make. Things were going well. We are starting to get on top of some of the issues we're facing in Vermont. We're moving the needle economically. We were moving in that right direction, but this could change very, very quickly. So it's something we have to be on the lookout for over the next 6 months. Yeah, of course.
Hi, Rep. Krasnow, Chittenden 9, South Burlington. I want to say that, you know, we are seeing that in our community already. When I'm not in the legislature, I'm at the South Burlington Food Shelf, and when I arrive, there's a line around the door. We, for folks who get Front Porch Forum, I put out weekly updates and talk about the numbers there, and this year we saw more folks than ever. And so it is happening here, and our community has really stepped up to fill many of the gaps that we can, and we can continue to do that. But, you know, top of mind for most of my constituents is, how am I going to make this work? And so with the fear and the present is already here, it's been really hard to see, because many of us, I remember when I was elected again just this November, I said to my sister, I said, I'm really scared and I don't know what to do. And she said, you have to stay there to fight for the people that we love in our community, to fight for people's partners and children, because, you know, we can't give up. And so in the spirit of community, we have to just in rooms like this between elections have to continue to organize and be together and look out for our neighbors. So I know that every one of us can continue to step up in that capacity so that people have their basic needs met while we're going through these trying times. So food security, a ride to a medical appointment, things like that are how we can step up here and help each other here. It's okay to ask for help. Yes, exactly. And think about offering help, too, in any way we can.
Thank you, Representative Krasnow. We have time for one more question while we have Senator Welch here, and then I'm told he may have to leave, and we'll move on to the next part of our program.
My name is Andre. I live in South Burlington, and I work at UVM. 2 points, as I'm an economist by training. That's the Ukrainian accent you hear. But anyway, first, the economy, thank you. The economy sends its signals in the following ways. Stock market is forward-looking, so it's yelling first that something is wrong. The backward-looking indicators, because they have to happen first, is consumer spending, inflation, and unemployment. And I don't want to make a forecast, but the economy needs to yell in a very non-polite way for people who are affected by those policies to wake up. Kentucky lost 1,700 jobs in whiskey manufacturing. So second point, and I don't like unemployment, don't take it, but as an economist, I believe the signals need to be loud. And then we're not dealing with the delicate decision makers. Second point, if to the elected politicians or anyone really, we have a great crowd here in the state, UVM students, but they're very apolitical. Sometimes you hear a sentence, I don't vote because I'm uninformed. But they have good hearts. So, and they reach out of state because UVM students come from. So if you can record brief YouTube videos, appealing to explaining. They don't know what you told us about what happens in Washington. And they have attention spans of 3 to 5 minutes. But they have good heart. So if someone invites you to speak at UVM, please, I'm not telling you what to do, but I think that's it.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. And thank you very much, Senator Welch, for being with us today. I don't want to get in trouble with Ryan, so.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. You know, we're going to look back. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through it. I don't know how. And none of us do. But the decision, it's a day at a time. Each day, each of us has a decision to make. It's not about the times that we're in. You know, sometimes people will ask me, Peter, do you like your job? And I'm hesitant to answer that because if I say I like my job, they think I'm cool with what's going on. I'm not. But each day, the decision we make is to face today's challenges. We can't decide what those are, but we can decide we're going to face them, or we're going to pull the covers over our head. And we're Vermonters. We face the day. We will get through this. So thank you all very much, and thank you, colleagues. It's wonderful to be with you. We're in the same enterprise. Thank you, Treasurer Chief Pieciak.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're now going to shift the discussion. I know that there's a lot more to say, but I want to leave time to hear from folks working in Montpelier that are with us today, so I'll go back to you, Treasurer Pieciak, for this part.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ashlyn. So, you know, we have an opportunity now to sort of have our legislators chat a little bit about what they heard and reflect on what they heard, and also chat a little bit about their work in Montpelier. Maybe we'll start on the far left with Senator Lyons and work our way back down toward me, if that works for you. You have the microphone.
As long as I have a microphone. Thank you all for being here. Ginny Lyons, and I do represent Chittenden Southeast, which includes South Burlington, and it's a real pleasure to be here with Treasurer Pieciak and my colleagues. We work well together in Montpelier, and we look forward to reducing your anxiety, your fear, and the concerns that have been expressed today. We all share them. We read the New York Times, the Burlington Free Press, the Vermont Digger, any other news that you can imagine every day. And the concerns that we feel are those that are shared, whether it's about what's going on in the Congo or whether what's going on in Westford or South Burlington. I do want to reflect a little bit on what I've heard today because I think it's important. I hear that there's division. Oh, surprise. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. But what we need to remember is that we need to compromise and to collaborate. You are all talking about working together and a sense of community. That is critically important. One of the things that underlines the situation that we're in today is Citizens United, which has left us with a deluge of money at the top down, and including coming into this state in past November. That is a huge concern. We need to do something about that, and we will. I'd also like to share with you how very important it is for us to support our own democratic process, whether it's a select board race, working with the town clerk to put together a good, solid election, running for justices of peace, and being someone who protects democracy. All these folks protect democracy, and I would hope that you understand that we are trying to do that as well in Montpelier. This past week, we passed a bill in the Senate, and we're sending it over to Representative Lalonde, that says that only the governor can declare when public safety, local public safety, and statewide public safety are used in ICE work and investigations. So it takes out the, with apologies to our local officers who are here, it does not allow for independent action on the part of local public safety, and it keeps some checks and balances in place. I just want to reinforce a number of things that you're going to hear from my friends to my right and from Treasurer Pieciak. We are working to reduce the costs that you face every day. It's great. Treasurer Pieciak has helped me very much with the medical debt bill that was just passed. And so we are trying to reduce medical debt for people. We talk about healthcare premiums being a burden, but if you have a medical debt of $30,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, you can't survive. People today are making choices between food and their prescriptions. People today are making choices between rent and getting to work. So we need to keep working together on this. And I'll ask one other thing of you, and that is, you know, if one of us votes the way you didn't want us to vote on one thing, that doesn't mean that we are not working for you democratically. So we need to stay with solidarity for democracy. And it is about communication, and it is about collaboration. So that's a little bit of a speech, and I apologize for going on in that way, but the fear that we all face, the anxiety, and the discomfort that is coming out of Washington, D.C. needs to be attenuated, and we're the ones who can do it in the state of Vermont. We understand democracy. We have worked together at the local level. We have town meetings that continue. We respect our town managers, our select boards, and we need to continue to do that. And I continue to listen to you. I get 200 emails a day. Sufficient to know that you all are educated about the topics that and the issues that we deal with in the State House in Montpelier. So as Chair of Health and Welfare, our biggest concern right now is keeping our providers, our patients, and our insurers solvent. And our biggest concern is making sure that our kids grow up in an environment that is healthy. And our biggest concern is that you all have access to the care that you need. In appropriations, we're looking to balance the budget in a way that supports all of our interests. We can't please everyone all the time, but we will work really hard to do that. And I do want to say thank you again to Treasurer Pieciak, who is working so hard for all of us in Montpelier. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Martin Lalonde, representative for Chittenden 12. This is my 11th year in the State House, and I chair the House Judiciary Committee. Before I talk just a little bit about some of the things we're doing in the committee itself, I am so pleased that, that I am a legislator in Vermont. Because, I mean, I wish that the national level would take some lessons from us, because we do have something like 54 Republicans and 87 Democrats and such, but it's a very collaborative building. You know, we're working together. The Republicans who are there, the Democrats, the independents, progressives, really are all there for the right reason, to try to do what's right for Vermont. We have disagreements over sometimes what those are, although I have to say that almost all the bills we passed out of judiciary this year were 11-0 votes, and there's a 6 Democrat, 5 Republican. And I'll mention some of those bills briefly that we passed. But it really, it's democracy is functioning in Vermont, in the State House and locally. And so far the poison that is at the national level hasn't reached here. And I'm very pleased at that. So we've done quite a few things out of the Judiciary Committee, but I'll just mention the ones that really are focused on helping or protecting the most vulnerable in Vermont. So we passed a law that expands and strengthens our hate crimes bill, making it easier for prosecutors to bring cases against individuals whose crimes are motivated by hate of a protected class, which includes race, gender identity, religion, etc. We also, a few years ago, we passed a law that was really a very advanced law as far as parentage. There's a lot of ways that we recognize who can become a parent in Vermont. One of the ways is with assisted reproduction, but the concern is that we recognize under Vermont law that somebody who uses assisted reproduction also often with LGBTQ parents, but other states don't. And if if individuals travel to other states, we have now given them a process to get an order from the court. It's called confirmatory adoption, in an expedited way. So they have a court order which other states have to respect under the full faith and credit clause. With respect to LGBTQ, specifically non-binary and trans individuals, we have a resolution that the Senate passed this past week unanimously. I think it's third reading tomorrow, or I mean on Tuesday, and we're going to be taking it up in judiciary, and we'll get it out. And it doesn't create any new laws, but it just shows that we're with the trans and non-binary folks. It's a vote of support for a very vulnerable population. So I will mention that there's a couple of things. You know, we've been forward thinking the last number of years. The law that that Senator Lyons mentioned with respect to ICE and such, that's something we passed under the first Trump administration. But there was an exemption that allowed, if there was a state of emergency, that local localities could make agreements with ICE, and we've removed that exemption, as Senator Lyons said. But we also, one last thing is that last biennium, we passed an important bill called the SHIELD bill that protects providers of reproductive and gender-affirming care. And so I mention that because actually the day before the election in November, I met with a representative from the ACLU And they were already thinking ahead, what are the things that we need to do? The ICE issue is one of them that they really pushed, and there's some other things they're still working on. But the day before, we talked about what they could do, and they said, Vermont's already done some of those important things, like the SHIELD bill, like the fair and impartial policing, and we've been building on that to protect the most vulnerable in Vermont. So.
Hi, I'm Kate Nugent, and I represent Chittenden 10 district. This is my second term, and I'm got a million thoughts, but just I think on the, not that there's a bright side, but like I keep reminding myself all the people that have been here are still here that we work with every day, including Treasurer Pieciak, who everywhere I go, talk about how much I admire his focus on practical strategy when it comes to fiscal policy, and also just a really strong moral compass. And I think that I find those two motivations kind of at the center of what I'm thinking about a lot of times too, is like, how do you take care of the money? Because that's really like the foundation of a strong organization. And then also do it with a moral purpose. So as far as dealing with the anxiety of the federal stuff, I also think that it's helpful to kind of try to accept what's happening. And for me, and this may or not turn out to be true, but it feels like this is kind of a seismic shift in our federal government, and whatever happens, nothing is gonna be the same as it was, which could be good and bad at the same time, but accepting that, and I think kind of getting into a mentality of like, okay, we know what's happening sometimes, and we can prepare for that, can kind of alleviate, at least for me, my anxiety. Like, we have to look to each other and think about what we can do. And I think, leaders will emerge out of that. I'm kind of a dork and I love history, so it feels a lot like World War I and II. Like World War I, they had just overcome a pandemic. Everyone was exhausted. And then you have the Depression and people were just tired of fighting. And then, you have this kind of like authoritarian person get a lot of power, I think, because of that exhaustion. And I sense that in myself. So I know that a lot of people are feeling that from the last Trump and the pandemic, but it's like, how do you get through that? And I think that we will, because our government and the people have a strong moral compass, and we know that most people are good and most people don't want others to suffer. So that is the thing to keep in mind. Thank you. As far as things that I'm personally working on or proud of that my committee is doing, we did a lot of work this week. We finished up a bill to help make flood response and hazard recovery as efficient as possible. We are adding 2 positions to that issue to coordinate with municipalities. So that will hopefully help municipalities, especially places that don't have grant writers or a lot of staff, and also help coordinate the federal and the state and the local funds. It also should make financing and structuring debt easier at the municipal level, because right now I think it goes up and down a lot depending on when what kind of loans you take out, and the bill that we just worked on will make that easier to deal with. Very exciting, but other things that we work with the National Guard in our committee, which is a wonderful partnership. We have an incredible leader over there, and I'm sure many of you know folks that work there. So that's, I think, always nice to know that they're there for us and we need them. And then I guess I'm just glad and grateful that I live in South Burlington, and I think a lot of the downtown development that we are hopefully making easier right now will strengthen things like walkable cities, which anything we can do, I think, to get out and move and see each other and make things more compact will help us with our health. And we worked with Dr. Levine recently, who gave us talk to some legislators that I was part of, and was just talking about the CDC and the federal government and how much we rely on that for information and prevention, all sorts of chronic disease prevention. But that may change quite a bit. So it's like, what can we do locally? I think we can, continue to support healthy activity, nutrition, and socialization. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, once again, so I'm Emily Krasnow, and I serve South Burlington, Chittenden 9, and I am the ranking member of the House General and Housing Committee, as well as the co-chair of the Working Vermonters Caucus, where Mike recently came in. So I want to touch on a few things. Obviously, as I mentioned, like Senator Welch was saying, it's hard to offer. I hope folks leave here feeling a little better. Okay. I guess for me, I will, because I see all of you showing up and sharing your experiences and your concern. When people show up, it helps people in our building and in Washington know that there are people who are paying attention and who care. We talked about going and talking to students, so I spend a lot of time as a younger legislator going into high schools and colleges and really expressing the importance of getting involved. If everyone spent, 1 hour a week doing something for their community, it kind of it doesn't take away the anxiety at the federal level, it helps our neighbors who, and while we're all struggling, I think is very impactful. So in our committee, we have housing, and I did want to touch on, Mike mentioned about the cost of materials for housing, and Senator Welch as well. That's something that's been a huge concern for folks coming in talking about building. That's going to be a really big problem. The cost of steel and wood and other things for materials. But I also want to talk. You mentioned about the poor folks being, really our most vulnerable is going to always suffer the most. And so I had a housing provider for a nonprofit reach out to me this morning talking about vouchers and HUD and how we're already, folks come into our committee and we can't fill those gaps. We can't fill all the gaps that we're going to be missing. And that's terrifying on a housing level. I think housing is a human right. And my number one priority in Montpelier is making sure that every Vermonter has a warm, safe roof over their head. So I'm really concerned about how it's going to impact housing when we're already in a crisis. So that's something that we're focusing on. And then in addition to housing in our portfolio is social justice. So the Human Rights Commission in Vermont, we're making sure that now more than ever, we give them the resources that they need to continue to protect Vermonters, as well as labor is in our portfolio. So making sure that the working Vermonters, that face the cuts that are coming or could be coming, really have those protections that they need. And we're also focusing on that in our caucus. Labor is under attack. Our education is under attack. It's a really hard time. So trying to find the joy can be difficult in the building. When I have friends say, they're like, "Oh, congratulations, you were reelected." I was like, no, it's good. But yes, it is a very tough time. But anyway, that's where I find hope. I find hope from rooms like this. Just as important as the work that we're doing in Montpelier is making sure that we're connected to all of you. So when an email comes in, even if it's, I'm terrified, how can you help? It's helpful because it lets us know that you're engaged and we can work together to try to keep having one foot here and one foot in the building. And I'll just close with that gratitude from all of you staying engaged. And I totally am involved and support the protests. And I also asked for folks who are doing that to think about volunteering, whether it's at a nonprofit. We mentioned the numbers. So I both work at a nonprofit and I'm on Medicaid. So I'm one of those people. So volunteering with our seniors, making sure, checking in on people, that's just as important as, our right to protest. And so I hope that folks are doing that too. And I have my cards with me, and I know we're all available to chat, and would love to stay engaged with all of you. And I'm just really grateful for the folks that turned out today, and for Treasurer Pieciak as well. Senator Lyons would like to take us home.
Thank you. Now, I think you've heard how really important and critically involved each one of us is, and we do work well together. So when I need help with housing in the House, I know where to go. When I need help in GovOps, I know where to go. When I need help in the judiciary, I know where to go. I did want to add one last thing. In 2015, when we were listening to the first Trump campaign, I said, this is not going well. And I started to put together a reproductive liberty constitutional amendment. In Vermont, it takes a long time to get that acted on. It took a long time, but it did happen. In the same year, but, and reflective of that is the SHIELD bill that Martin is talking about, and then he and I have worked on a lot. The other thing that I thought about at the same time was an inclusive equal rights amendment, so that regardless of your sex, your gender identity, your religion, your race, that you would be treated equally in the state of Vermont. So a constitutional amendment for that. Great news. That passed both Senate and House last year, and then this next year will be voted on again, and then in 2026 we have an opportunity to vote on that constitutional amendment. So we are doing what we need to do as in democracy. I'm talking about us collectively in the room, and so thank you all for your support of the work that we do. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. I want to echo some of the sentiments that we heard from the stage, and in recognition of the many comments and questions that we didn't get to hear today, please continue to engage with us. I neglected to introduce myself at the beginning, but my name is Ashlyn. I'm the Director of Policy in the Treasurer's Office and staff to the Treasurer's Task Force on the Federal Transition. If you have additional thoughts or comments that you didn't get to share today that you would like us to hear about, please don't hesitate to email us at treasurers.office@vermont.gov. That email address is on our webpage. It's not just a receptacle. We do really check it every day. And we look forward to hearing from you. So with that, we're going to...
Thanks, Ashlyn. Well, before just some closing remarks, I do want to thank Ashlyn and Isaac Dano, who was volunteering for us today, and also Maida Townsend, who was volunteering to make sure everyone knew where to go and what to do. And one of our task force members is also here, Brian Lowe, who's in the back, who's been helping us think through a lot of the issues that we talked about today and a lot of the issues that you brought up as well. So want to thank them for their time and attention, especially on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. And again, want to thank you all for coming out on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. You know, I mentioned the point about community at the beginning, and I just want to put a finer point on that. You know, the kind of movement that we're seeing in this country, authoritarianism, that those tendencies, those outright actions that are happening in Washington, D.C., you know, that thrives on people being isolated and discouraged and not showing up and being quiet. So of all the things that we can all do, it's going to be continuing to show up for each other, continuing to show up for our communities, continuing to stand up and speak out when you see things that are not consistent with Vermont values. I know I will continue to do that. I know our legislators will continue to do that. Elected leaders here in Vermont of any party will continue to do that. But we need everyone that's in Vermont to continue to speak up and show up. So my closing thought is really about action. How can we take action in this moment? You've heard this from a number of speakers today, but I really believe action is the thing that will get us through this, and they can be actions big and small. You know, when we heard from Emily that, taking somebody to a medical appointment, or stopping by and volunteering at a food bank, or providing somebody a meal, or giving somebody a hug. I mean, those things might seem small, but to the person that's getting that benefit, it's a really big deal for them to be getting that kind of help in a moment of desperation. It could mean volunteering at your food bank, donating locally to charities rather than sort of focused on charities that are across the country, thinking about buying locally instead of supporting corporations that don't necessarily invest and reinvest into Vermont. Joining Amazon, for example, $500 million every year goes out of Vermont on that one platform alone. So there's a good company called maketv locally that is sort of a Vermont-based version of that supports local companies. It'd be a good option to think about. Say it again? Oh, Mighty, M-Y-T-I, yeah. So things big and small, I encourage everybody, showing up even today was an action that everybody took to stand up. Yes. Actually, right, that's right. And speaking about showing up, one action I wanted to mention is on April 5th. There is will be another rally protest in Montpelier on the Capitol steps. Last week, they had 3,000 people. This time in April, a couple of weeks, we want to have 6,000 people, right? That's the goal. So tell your friends, tell your family, showing up, making your voices heard. So if everyone can commit to just one action that they're going to take as a result of coming here today, again, big or small, whether in your community, whether in your way that you spend your money or spend your time, make sure you do that and make sure you continue to commit to taking those actions. We're going to need to do that to get through this together. Well, certainly encourage you. Certainly encourage.
Town hall.
Yeah, town hall.
My chapter of Indivisible has requested Campbell's Hump Indivisible.
Oh yeah, great. We'd be happy to come.
Please hold a town hall.
Yeah, I think
We'd be very grateful.
calling the office, emailing the office, writing the office is important to let folks know how you feel. As I said, we'll summarize what we heard today and in Brattleboro and provide that to everybody, including to the governor's office. But I think continuing to reach out, because we do need to be accessible to our constituents, and folks will take comfort in knowing what are the issues we're working on. And even if we don't have the answers, that's all right. We can tell you what we're considering and what the concern is and how we're thinking about getting through it. So I think it's important, reach out to the office. Yeah. Yeah. Say it again.
What time is the protest on the 5th, and what's that concerning?
At noon, and it's about the federal actions. So, national protest 50, everywhere.
Not just Montpelier.
Yeah.
6,000 people to come to Montpelier and find Carson.
Yeah.
And all of that. So, whoever's organizing.
I'll say the one on Saturday. The one on Saturday was very well coordinated and organized, and I will also say it's important that we spread it out through Vermont. That's why we started in Brattleboro, and we were in South Burlington today, and we'll continue to find ways to engage people across the rest of the state. So again, thank you all for coming here today. Please talk to us if you have additional questions. Really appreciate it, and have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Bridget.